She was Hollywood's biggest pinup. He was cinema's boy genius. And together, they made a movie that almost destroyed them both. The Lady from Shanghai wasn't just film noir. It was a marriage falling apart on camera, a studio boss screaming in fury, and a director so desperate for cash, he sold his wife's iconic image for a gamble. Hair got cut, mirrors shattered, and one film became the most expensive divorce in Hollywood history. These are 20 weird facts about The Lady from Shanghai. And the bonus? The scene that was so dangerous it could have killed the biggest star in America. Welcome to the Funhouse. Nothing here is what it seems. Rita Hayworth was untouchable in 1946. The most famous woman in the world, her face on every magazine, her hair, that cascading red mane, plastered on lockers across every military base from Europe to the Pacific. Gilda had just made her a legend. Men worshipped her. Women wanted to be her. And then Orson Welles walked into her dressing room with scissors and bleach. He wanted to cut it all off, dye what remained platinum blonde, transform America's love goddess into something cold, foreign, unrecognizable. Rita hesitated. She knew what that hair meant. It wasn't just beauty, it was currency, it was power. But Welles insisted. He didn't want Rita Hayworth the star. He wanted Elsa Bannister the destroyer. So, she sat down, closed her eyes, and let him destroy her image. When Harry Cohn, the head of Columbia Pictures, saw the result, he went ballistic. He screamed that Welles had vandalized the studio's most valuable asset. He wasn't wrong. The transformation was shocking, almost violent. Audiences who came to see Rita Hayworth didn't recognize the woman on screen, and they didn't like it. The haircut wasn't just a character choice. It was a statement. Welles was saying he didn't care about the star system, about box office safety, about what the studio wanted. He'd rather burn it all down and make something strange. And that haircut, it became the most infamous makeover in Hollywood history, not because it was beautiful, because it was betrayal. Orson Welles didn't make The Lady from Shanghai because he loved the script or believed in the story. He made it because he was desperate. In 1946, Welles owed Columbia Pictures a picture, a contractual obligation he couldn't escape. But what he really wanted was money to finish a stage production of Around the World in 80 days, a massive theatrical spectacle that was bleeding cash faster than he could raise it. So, Welles made Harry Cohn an offer. Let me make a picture, fast and cheap, and I'll get you Rita Hayworth. Cohn practically drooled. Rita was box office gold, and Welles, despite being her husband, could deliver her without agents or negotiations. There was just one problem. Welles didn't have a script. He walked into Cohn's office holding a paperback thriller he'd bought at a drugstore, If I Die Before I Wake by Sherwood King. Welles claimed he'd read it and loved it. He hadn't read a single page. He pitched it anyway. Cohn, blinded by the chance to get Rita Hayworth in a film noir, said yes immediately. Only later did Welles actually crack the book open, and when he did, he realized it was a mess. Convoluted, overwritten, barely coherent. But by then, the deal was done. So Welles did what he always did. He rewrote it on the fly, turned it into something stranger, darker, more personal. The result was a film nobody understood, nobody liked, and nobody could forget. All because a genius needed cash and a studio boss wanted a star. When filming began, Orson Welles and Rita Hayworth were still married, barely. By the time it wrapped, they were done. The Lady from Shanghai wasn't just a movie, it was the death rattle of a relationship. On set, they were professional, cold, distant. Welles directed her like she was a stranger. Rita performed like she was already gone. Cast and crew could feel it. The tension wasn't subtext, it was the text. Every scene between them felt loaded, dangerous, like one wrong word might detonate everything. And maybe that's why the movie works, because what you're watching isn't acting. It's two people trapped in a nightmare, circling each other, destroying each other, frame by frame. Welles later admitted he cast Rita knowing it would hurt her. He weaponized the camera, made her vulnerable, made her a villain, and Rita knew what he was doing. She hated the role, hated the haircut, hated being directed by the man she was leaving, but she showed up every day, because professionals finish the job, even when the job is dismantling your marriage in front of 50 people. When filming wrapped, they barely spoke. The divorce was filed shortly after. The Lady from Shanghai became a document of something tragic, a marriage immortalized as it shattered. The Hall of Mirrors. Everyone remembers it. The climax of The Lady from Shanghai, where Elsa and her husband shoot at reflections, shattering glass in every direction until the real and the false become indistinguishable. It's one of the most iconic sequences in film noir, but it almost bankrupted the production. Welles wanted something no one had ever seen before, a maze of mirrors where the audience couldn't tell what was real. So the crew built it, massive panes of glass, angled and layered, each one polished to perfection. And then they had to break them. Not by accident, on purpose, with real bullets, or what looked like real bullets. The cost was staggering. Each mirror cost a fortune. Each take destroyed dozens of them, and there were no second chances. If an actor missed their mark, if the camera angle was wrong, if the lighting didn't land, they had to reset everything, replace every broken mirror, start over. The studio was furious. They watched the budget explode. They watched Welles reshoot the sequence over and over, chasing perfection. And Welles, he didn't care. He knew this scene would define the movie. So he kept breaking glass until he got it right. The result is pure cinema, disorienting, violent, poetic. A visual metaphor for a film where nothing is what it seems, where every face is a lie, and where the truth, when you finally see it, it's too late. The Hall of Mirrors didn't just cost money, it cost sanity. But it gave the movie its soul. When Orson Welles delivered his cut of The Lady from Shanghai, it ran over 2 hours. Harry Cohn watched it in stunned silence. Then he stood up and declared it the worst film he'd ever seen. He didn't stop there. He ordered the editors to gut it, cut it down, make it make sense, make it sellable. Over the next months, the studio slashed nearly an hour of footage. Entire subplots vanished. Character motivations disappeared. Scenes that Welles had painstakingly crafted were rearranged, shuffled, dumped entirely. What remained was a film that moved like a fever dream. Plot points appeared out of nowhere. Characters acted without explanation. The story lurched forward in ways that felt broken, fragmented, almost surreal, and audiences hated it. They walked out confused. Critics called it incoherent. Even Rita Hayworth reportedly said she didn't understand what the movie was about. But here's the strange part. That confusion, that disorientation, it worked. Because film noir was never supposed to hold your hand. It was supposed to trap you in a world where nothing added up, where everyone lied, where you couldn't trust what you were seeing. Welles later claimed the studio destroyed his vision. And maybe they did. But what they left behind was something haunting, a film that feels incomplete, unstable, like it might collapse at any moment. The Lady from Shanghai wasn't ruined by the cuts. It was transformed into something stranger and darker than Welles ever intended, a broken masterpiece. Test audiences didn't just dislike The Lady from Shanghai, they were baffled by it. Columbia Pictures held multiple screenings trying to figure out what went wrong. Cards came back with the same complaints over and over. Too confusing. Couldn't follow the story. Who was the villain? Some viewers admitted they had no idea what happened in the final 20 minutes. Others said the plot lost them halfway through, and they just watched for the visuals. Harry Cohn was furious. He'd sunk a fortune into this picture. He'd put his biggest star in it, and audiences were walking out scratching their heads. The problem wasn't the acting or the cinematography. It was the story itself. Welles had taken a pulpy thriller and turned it into a labyrinth. Double crosses stacked on double crosses, characters lying about lying. A climax where the entire plot gets explained in rapid-fire dialogue that only made things more confusing. The studio tried everything. They recut scenes, they added voiceover narration, they moved sequences around hoping to clarify the story. Nothing worked, because the confusion wasn't a mistake, it was the design. Welles wanted the audience lost. He wanted them to feel like Michael O'Hara, the doomed sailor who stumbles into a nightmare he can't escape. And that's exactly what he got. A film so tangled, so dense, that watching it feels like drowning. You can't breathe, you can't see the surface. You just keep sinking deeper into the dark. And maybe that's why it endures, because 50 years later, it still doesn't make sense. And somehow, that's the point. Before the studio backlot, before Hollywood, there was Acapulco. Orson Welles took the entire production to Mexico for location shooting, and it was chaos. The heat was unbearable, the crew exhausted. Equipment broke down in the humidity, and Welles just kept filming, on boats, in markets, on rocky cliffs overlooking the Pacific. He wanted authenticity. He wanted sweat. He wanted the film to feel dangerous, unstable. The Mexican authorities weren't thrilled. Permits were delayed, locations suddenly unavailable. At one point, they nearly shut down the entire production, but Welles kept pushing. Shot scenes without permission, improvised when locations fell through. The yacht scenes weren't filmed on a set. That was a real boat, rocking in real water. Rita Hayworth, Hollywood royalty, spent days seasick, trying to hold it together between takes. And Welles didn't ease up. He demanded take after take. He wanted exhaustion on screen. And it worked. Those Acapulco scenes pulse with life. Raw, unpredictable. They feel like a documentary of people slowly losing their minds in paradise, which, in a way, they were. Rita Hayworth didn't understand what Orson Welles was doing to her. She'd spent years building an image. The girl next door who became a goddess. Glamorous, untouchable, perfect. Directors lit her like a painting. Costumers dressed her like royalty. And audiences adored her for it. Then Welles came along and tore it all down. The hair was just the beginning. He made her cold. He made her calculating. He turned her into a villain, a femme fatale who destroyed men without hesitation. And Rita, she didn't know how to play that. She'd built a career on warmth, on charm, on making audiences fall in love with her. Now, her own husband was asking her to make them hate her. On set, she'd ask him, "Why are you doing this? Why do you want me to be this person?" And Welles would just say, "Because you can be." But that wasn't an answer. It was a dare. He was challenging her to show something she'd kept hidden. The anger, the sharpness, the woman underneath the image. And Rita, despite her confusion, despite her pain, she did it. She gave Welles exactly what he wanted. A performance that stripped away the goddess and revealed something human, flawed, dangerous. But it cost her. Audiences didn't want to see Rita Hayworth as a villain. They wanted Gilda. They wanted the fantasy. And when they didn't get it, they stayed. Away. The Lady from Shanghai flopped at the box office. And Rita knew why. Because Welles had taken the thing people loved most about her and destroyed it, not for art, for revenge. The funhouse sequence wasn't filmed in a funhouse. It was built from scratch on a soundstage, and it was a nightmare. Welles wanted slides, distorted mirrors, tunnels, sudden drops. He wanted the space to feel unstable, dangerous, like reality itself was breaking apart. So, the crew constructed it, and it was massive, larger than anyone expected, expensive, complicated, dangerous. Cast members had to slide down chutes not knowing what waited at the bottom. They had to navigate through darkness while crew members moved set pieces around them. And the mirrors, those weren't just props. They were industrial-grade glass, heavy and sharp. One wrong move, and someone could have gotten seriously hurt. During one take, Rita Hayworth slid down a chute faster than expected. She hit the bottom hard, nearly twisting her ankle. The crew rushed in. Welles called for a reset, and Rita, shaken but professional, climbed back up to do it again. The sequence took weeks to film. Every angle had to be perfect. Every reflection had to be calculated. And through it all, the studio kept asking Welles, "What is this for? Why do we need a funhouse in a murder mystery?" And Welles would just smile and say, "Because the whole world's a funhouse. You just haven't noticed yet." The sequence made it into the final cut. It's disorienting, surreal, terrifying. And it's the moment where the film stops pretending to be a normal noir and becomes something else entirely, a nightmare you can't wake up from. Harry Cohn hated The Lady from Shanghai with a fury that became legendary. He didn't just dislike it, he despised it. He felt betrayed. He'd given Welles creative freedom, a big budget, and Columbia's biggest star. And what did he get? A confusing, uncommercial art film that audiences rejected. Cohn reportedly said he'd rather have spent the money on 3 cheap westerns. At least those would have made their money back. He buried the movie, barely promoted it, dumped it into theaters without fanfare, and when it flopped, he blamed Welles for everything. The overspending, the weird choices, the blonde hair, the missing plot. He swore he'd never work with Welles again, and he didn't. But here's the twist. Decades later, after Cohn was dead, after Rita was retired, after Welles had become a tragic legend, The Lady from Shanghai found its audience. Film students dissected it. Critics reappraised it. It showed up on lists of the greatest noirs ever made. And suddenly, the thing Harry Cohn hated became the thing Columbia Pictures was proud of. Because in the end, Cohn understood business. He understood stars. But he never understood art. He saw a disaster. History saw a masterpiece. Everett Sloane, who played Arthur Bannister, wasn't supposed to look that terrifying, but Welles had a vision. He wanted Bannister to move like a spider, all angles and unnatural motion. Sloane spent weeks with a physical therapist learning to walk with canes in a way that looked both painful and predatory. He practiced until his arms ached, until the motion became second nature, and when cameras rolled, he transformed. Every step looked wrong, every gesture calculated. He didn't walk through scenes, he stalked through them. But here's the dark part. Sloane was method. He didn't just perform the limp, he lived in it. Between takes, he stayed in character, kept the canes, kept the posture, and slowly, it started to hurt. His back, his shoulders, his arms. By the end, he was genuinely in pain, and Welles knew. But he didn't stop, because the pain made it real. Years later, Sloane said he had nightmares about that role, not because of what he did on screen, but because of what it did to him off screen.
So you would be foolish to fire that gun.
Glenn Anders, who played George Grisby, gave one of the strangest performances in noir history, and it was completely intentional. Welles told him to play Grisby like a man who'd already lost his mind. High-pitched voice, manic energy, eyes darting everywhere. Anders committed completely. He made Grisby twitchy, unsettling, like a bomb about to explode. Audiences didn't know what to do with it. Some thought it was brilliant, others called it over the top, too theatrical for film. But Welles loved it, because Grisby wasn't supposed to be normal. He was a clue, a walking red flag that something was very wrong. Anders improvised entire scenes, keeping other actors off balance. Rita Hayworth said working with him was like acting opposite a live wire. Every scene with Grisby feels dangerous, like he's in on a joke no one else understands. Decades later, people still argue whether he was genius or wildly miscast. The answer is both. The aquarium scene. It's one of the most visually stunning sequences in the film. Michael and Elsa talk in front of massive tanks filled with sharks, eels, and strange deep-sea creatures. The imagery is hypnotic, fish swimming behind them like living shadows, the water casting ripples of light across their faces. It looks expensive. It looks planned. It was neither. Welles didn't have permission to film at the Steinhardt Aquarium in San Francisco. The production was denied access. Too disruptive, too complicated, too risky with all the equipment. So, Welles did what he always did. He ignored them. He showed up with a skeleton crew, handheld cameras, and minimal lighting. He pretended they were tourists. They waited until the crowds thinned. And then, they shot. Fast. Quiet. Guerrilla style. Rita Hayworth and Orson Welles performed their scene with actual visitors walking behind them, oblivious that they were in a movie. Security eventually noticed. They were asked to leave. They'd already gotten what they needed. The whole sequence was captured in under 2 hours. One take for most. Shots, no coverage, no safety net. And it became one of the most iconic scenes in the film. Because it doesn't look like a Hollywood production, it looks real, dangerous. Like Welles stole something beautiful and made it his own. Which, in a way, he did. The Lady from Shanghai is full of broken rules. And this scene, filmed without permission in front of predators behind glass, it's the perfect metaphor for the entire movie. Beautiful, illegal, and way too close to something that could bite. When the film was finally released in 1948, it bombed. Hard. It barely made back half its budget. Theaters pulled it after weeks. Audiences stayed away. Columbia took the loss. But then something strange happened. In Europe, the film found a different audience. French critics went wild for it. They saw what American audiences missed. The visual poetry, the fractured narrative, the way Welles used the camera to disorient and seduce. They didn't care that the plot was confusing. They celebrated it. Film journals published essays analyzing the symbolism. They called Welles a visionary, and slowly, that reputation spread. By the 1960s, it was taught in universities. By the 70s, completely reappraised. The film that flopped in 1948 became a cornerstone of noir. Not because it changed, but because audiences finally caught up. Welles was making a movie that valued mood over clarity, that trusted audiences to piece together meaning from fragments. The Lady from Shanghai didn't fail. It was just decades ahead of its time, and Welles was finally vindicated, long after he stopped caring. Rita Hayworth's singing voice in The Lady from Shanghai isn't Rita Hayworth. She's dubbed by Anita Ellis, a vocalist who specialized in voice matching for Hollywood stars. It was standard practice. Studios didn't trust their stars to carry musical numbers. They'd cast someone beautiful, then have someone trained do the actual singing. Rita knew this. She'd been dubbed before. But this time, it hurt differently. Because the song Elsa sings, Please Don't Kiss Me, isn't just a musical number. It's the emotional core of her character, a woman trapped in a marriage, begging for escape, singing to a man she can't have, and Rita couldn't even deliver it in her own voice. Welles made the decision. He wanted the song to sound perfect, ethereal, haunting, and Rita's voice, while lovely, wasn't trained for that kind of ballad. So, he hired Ellis. And Rita, she had to stand on set and lip sync to someone else's voice, someone else's emotion. It was humiliating, not because Ellis was bad, she was extraordinary, but because in a film that was already stripping Rita of everything, her image, her hair, her warmth, now it was taking her voice too. Years later, Rita admitted that moment hurt more than anything else in the production. Because singing was personal, it was vulnerable, and having it taken away, given to someone else, it felt like one more piece of her had been erased. The song is beautiful in the film, heartbreaking, perfect. But every time Rita watched it, she heard a ghost, someone who sounded like her but wasn't. And it reminded her of everything she'd lost in making this movie. The famous line, I'm pretty but I'm not beautiful. I sin but I'm not the devil. I'm good but I'm not an angel, didn't come from the original novel. Welles wrote it specifically for Rita, and it wasn't a character description, it was a confession. He was writing about the woman he'd married, the woman he'd turned into a goddess and then resented for becoming one. Rita was supposed to deliver it looking into a mirror, but during rehearsal, she broke down. She couldn't say the lines, because she knew what they meant. She knew Welles was telling the world who he thought she really was, and it hurt. Welles, for once, backed off. He reblocked the scene, gave her a different angle, let her deliver it without the mirror, without having to look at herself while saying those words. But the damage was done. The line stayed in the script, and when Rita finally delivered it on camera, there's something in her eyes, something raw. She's not acting anymore. She's defending herself, against her husband, against the camera, against everyone who wanted to turn her into something simple when she was actually complicated. That line became one of the most quoted in film noir. People remember it because it sounds profound. But the truth is darker. It's not philosophy. It's weaponized intimacy. A man using his art to define his wife. And Rita, she had to stand there and say the words, even though she knew exactly what he was doing, even though it broke her heart. The courtroom scene, where Michael O'Hara is on trial for murder, was filmed in a real courthouse. Not a set, not a recreation. An actual San Francisco courtroom. And Welles filled it with real people, not extras. Citizens pulled from the street who thought they were watching an actual trial. He wanted authentic reactions, genuine confusion, real faces registering real emotions. So he staged the entire sequence like a documentary, hidden cameras, minimal crew, no Hollywood artifice. And it worked. The courtroom feels lived in, dense with bodies and sweat and tension. But there was a problem. The trial makes no sense. The plot is so convoluted by this point that even the actors didn't fully understand what was happening. Welles wrote pages of legal dialogue that explained the conspiracy, the fake murder plot, the insurance scheme. But it comes so fast, delivered in such dense legalese, that it's nearly impossible to follow. And those real people in the courtroom, they were completely lost. You can see it on their faces, genuine confusion, not performance, actual bewilderment. Some thought it was a comedy, others thought it was a foreign film. One woman reportedly asked if there would be subtitles, Welles loved it because that confusion was honest. And in a film about lies, deception, and characters who can't tell truth from fiction, having an audience that's genuinely lost became part of the experience. The courtroom scene doesn't clarify anything. It buries the truth under more confusion. And those real faces, those real reactions, they're proof that Welles succeeded. He didn't just confuse his audience, he trapped them in the maze with everyone else. The final shootout in the Hall of Mirrors almost killed Rita Hayworth. Not metaphorically, literally. The scene required gunfire, breaking glass, actors navigating through sharp shards in near darkness. During one take, a mirror shattered wrong. A large piece broke free and fell. It missed Rita by inches, slammed into the ground right where she'd been standing a second before. The entire set went silent. Someone yelled, "Cut." Rita stood frozen, staring at the glass. If she'd been a half step slower, it would have hit her, could have killed her. They reset, added more safety measures, tried again, and Welles kept pushing for one more take, one more angle. Rita later said she was terrified, not of the character, of the set itself. But she kept going, because that's what professionals do. They finish the job, even when the job might kill them. The final scene is breathtaking, disorienting, beautiful. And knowing how close it came to disaster makes it feel different, more dangerous, more real. Because it was. After The Lady from Shanghai wrapped, Orson Welles and Rita Hayworth barely spoke again. The divorce was finalized in 1948, the same year the film was released. And for the rest of their lives, they avoided talking about it. Rita never appeared in another Welles film. Welles never cast anyone like her again. They moved on, separate paths, but the film stayed with them. Years later, in interviews, Rita was asked about it constantly. She'd say nice things, professional things, but you could see the pain underneath. She never forgot what that production cost her. The hair, the image, the marriage, all sacrificed for a film that failed. And Welles, he rarely discussed it either. When pressed, he'd call it one of his best films. He'd defend the choices, but he'd never talk about Rita. Never admit what making that movie did to her, to them. Because The Lady from Shanghai wasn't just a movie, it was a document of destruction, a marriage dying on film, two people who loved each other once, destroying each other frame by frame, and neither of them wanted to revisit that. The film survived, it became a classic, but the people who made it carried scars that never healed. Decades later, when Welles was asked if he'd do anything differently, he paused, then said, "I'd have let her keep her hair." It was the closest he ever came to an apology, and by then, it was far too late. The Lady from Shanghai was supposed to save Orson Welles' career. Instead, it nearly ended it. After the disaster of Citizen Kane's box, Office after the studio battles, after being labeled difficult and expensive, Welles needed a commercial hit. The Lady from Shanghai was supposed to be it, big star, genre film, studio backing, everything aligned, and then it flopped, spectacularly. Columbia Pictures blamed him for everything. The budget overruns, the confusing story, the blonde hair. They blacklisted him quietly. Other studios heard the stories. Difficult, uncontrollable, expensive. For years, Welles couldn't get work in Hollywood. He'd gone from boy genius to unemployable in less than a decade. He fled to Europe, started directing plays, took acting jobs just to survive. The Lady from Shanghai, the film that was supposed to prove he could work within the system, proved the opposite, that he couldn't or wouldn't. And Hollywood remembered, but here's the strange epilogue. The film that destroyed Welles' career also preserved his legacy. Because decades later, when critics and scholars looked back at his work, The Lady from Shanghai stood out, not as a failure, but as proof of his genius. A film so ahead of its time that audiences weren't ready. A work of art disguised as a thriller. And slowly, Welles' reputation was rebuilt. Not by the films that made money, but by the ones that didn't. By the strange, difficult, impossible projects that proved he was more interested in art than commerce. The Lady from Shanghai failed in 1948, but it succeeded forever. And Welles, who died believing he'd squandered his talent, left behind a masterpiece he never fully appreciated. Elsa Bannister doesn't exist. She's a phantom. A lie built on lies. Every story she tells is fiction. Wells wrote her to be unknowable, but really, it's about Rita. He was saying he never knew her, that the woman he married was a construction created by studios. Maybe she was trapped inside that image. Or maybe there was nothing underneath, just reflections, just lies. When the mirrors shatter and Elsa lies dying, what's left? Broken glass. The Lady from Shanghai is a ghost story about a marriage, about two people who destroyed each other. All that's left are shards, beautiful, dangerous, impossible to put back together.